Hey everyone, welcome back to the Nello Reads channel. Today we'll be browsing through some malicious compliance stories. Our first story comes from Rock'n'Rolla Ayatollah. Don't like the amount offered? Then take nothing and like it. My wife, female 31, and I, male 33, like many other Americans, are beleaguered under the for-profit medical insurance industry. My wife gave birth to our precious first daughter in September of 2021, and we have been dealing with taking the little one to the doctor, already had an emergency room visit, yay, and whatnot. Well, we received the bill for the labor and delivery at the hospital from September. We were charged over $20,000 for a straightforward, regular delivery with an epidural. Even though I do not like our insurance, it covered a huge chunk of the amount due. That being said, there was still over $2,000 left. Well, with my wife being a teacher and myself being a state government worker, our income isn't exactly low, but it isn't high either. $2,000 out of pocket would put us into major debt. The hospital was very patient at first with trying to get paid until recently. I had been in communication with the hospital trying to negotiate the cheapest amount possible to clear the account. The hospital still wanted close to half of the amount in order to close the account out. I countered with what we could legitimately offer and co-signed myself to the addition of yet another auto debit coming out of our bank account because they weren't going to accept my offer. But then the account representative kept interrupting me during the phone call and was being outrageously rude. I understand that we have a debt, and I'm not trying to welch on it, but don't treat me like dirt because of this piss-poor system that was charging my wife over $50 for one friggin' Advil amongst other insanity. The account representative continued being nasty during the call and derisively suggested maybe I should go to the financial assistance program. So I did. I called the customer service line for that said program, and in less than 10 minutes I was getting confirmation of the entire amount being forgiven. Apparently, when you make less than 300% the federal poverty rate and you go to most nonprofit hospitals, they will forgive the amount. The arrogant account representative tried to shame me into paying an outrageous price for services rendered and didn't want to accept my offer of paying some of the bill. So now they get absolutely nothing. Don't accept the medical bills that you receive. Fight tooth and nail to get it down, and if you're lucky like my wife and I, you just may get it all cleared away. Don't get me wrong, I love America, but man, I hate our medical system. Just being alive is so expensive. It's also complicated too. Insurance covers some things, but not others. Some things are more or less expensive depending on where you go. I just wish we had a better system, like how you go to a fast food restaurant and the prices are always the same on the menu. But for now, OP's tip of fighting to get your bills cleared is a good idea. Definitely something I'll have to look into should I ever incur a big medical bill. And based on how my price analogy was using a fast food restaurant, I might have one sooner rather than later, so maybe I should cut back on that. Our second story of the day comes from a name I'm not allowed to say on YouTube, but it is on screen. You need to wait for a manager to let you go home. Okay. So I work at a store that sells kitchen appliances and other kitchen related stuff. Normally, when we're supposed to leave or go on break, we're supposed to tell our manager. I was helping a long line at cash and had already been there for 8 hours and assumed they had somebody to cover me. I wasn't allowed to use the walkies to ask to be covered to go home, so I quickly found my manager and told her my shift was done. She got really pissy at me and said, "Could you really not stay a few more minutes?" I tried to tell her, "I thought you had someone to cover me. I can stay if you want." She then replied, No, just go home. But next time you need to wait for a manager to let you go home. Record scratch. This was never a rule. I asked other people who've worked there for years and they agreed it wasn't a rule. I worked again a few days later and the store was empty. My shift was over and I was about to go home. Then I remembered what my manager told me. Cue malicious compliance. I continued to wander the store and slightly fix shelves, making sure I was near my manager. After about 2.5 hours, she said, "You're still here? Why haven't you gone home?" I replied, "You said I need to wait to be told to go home." My manager looked at me as though she was mentally kicking herself. "Just go," she said. I clocked out, and that's how I got paid an extra $30 for doing literally nothing. Not gonna lie, having to ask permission to go home sounds pretty awful. I'm lucky enough to be my own boss right now, but should I ever have to go back to the corporate world, I would like to go somewhere where when that clock strikes 5, I'm out of there no matter what. But that's probably, unfortunately, just wishful thinking. The third story of the day comes from Ranting URL. Tag office wants more paperwork? I shall oblige. When I was transitioned out of the military, I naturally went down to my home state. This meant I had a lot of adulting to do, like setting up my new life. So I get up early one morning and start knocking things out on my to-do list. License renewal, medical stuff, change of address, etc, etc. Due to this, I was rolling around town with every scrap of paperwork about me in existence. Well, the day is going great, and I'm down to my last task: registering my car with the tag office. I pull up to the place with 30 minutes to spare, grab the few necessary documents, I googled the process before and I knew exactly what I would need, and head inside. There are only 2 others in line and I'm at the counter in no time. I explained to the lady at the counter that I'm transferring my car back to my home state and am looking to get a veteran's tag. She, kind of rudely I might add, tells me how much it costs, but their card reader is down and I need exact change in cash. She then tells me where an ATM is. It's about a 10-minute walk and still wouldn't give the exact change I needed. Not having cash on hand, I shrug and walk out the door. I get 2 steps out and remember, this type of transaction is free for veterans in my state. I walk right back in and explain this. She starts the process, but appears very agitated. We get to the part where she starts asking for documents and I start providing. After seeing everything I have, she starts claiming my proof of residence isn't enough and I need at least 2 different utility bills and that the cable bill in my hand wouldn't work, which was total BS. At this point, I figure out what she's trying to do. She just doesn't want to deal with me and is trying to run the clock down until they close by giving me arbitrary demands for paperwork I shouldn't be able to dig up in the next 20 minutes. Very well, I respond. Cue malicious compliance. I walk back to my car, grab my file full of neatly organized documents, and spend the next 5 minutes shuffling them like playing cards. Wait till 5 minutes before they close, and walk back in. Accordion folder of chaos in hand. I slowly walk up to her counter yet again. She is not happy to see me back. I set my folder onto the counter and ask, "What were those documents you needed?" She tells me, but tries to double down and names off more stuff this time. Bad idea on her part. I start thumbing through my folder as slowly as I possibly can, going from A to Z, flipping past every piece of paper in this thing, removing documents as I find them, and start organizing them into sections on the countertop. It took forever. Once finished, I slowly and carefully explain each section. So, over here you have 2 months worth of cable bills, a power bill, water bill, phone bill with associated receipts for payments rendered. Here you have my birth certificate, social security card, 2 separate passports, state issued ID, and driver's license. That's followed by original discharge papers, military ID, and a copy of my original orders. Now here's my leasing agreement for my apartment, along with 4 money orders and receipts for the past 4 months of rent paid. Lastly, over here, we have a bill of sale for my car, proof of insurance, 5 years worth of vehicle registrations and vehicle title. Is there anything I've missed? Without a word, she starts banging away at her keyboard. A minute later, she asks me what type of license plate I want. I tell her. The one I was getting was supposed to display an award I received while in the military. She smugly tells me I need proof I earned said award. Cue 5 more minutes of slowly digging through paperwork. I pull out the completely unnecessary award sheet and then point out it's also listed on my discharge paperwork already in her hand. 5 minutes spent updating my info in the system without even looking at the paperwork I provided, and I left with a brand new tag in hand. 30 minutes after they were supposed to have closed. I still laugh about it to this day. This has to be one of my favorite stories I've ever read because I can relate to it. I'm not one of those people who goes into businesses 5 minutes before they close and goes shopping, but I will show up to one a half hour beforehand, and it's so infuriating when they've already locked the doors or say they're closed or that they can't handle whatever I need them to do before closing when it would really only take 5 minutes. Or the one I can think a lot of you have probably encountered, the McDonald's employee lying and saying the ice cream machine is broken because they've already cleaned it for the night. Sure, sometimes it's really broken, but one is probably more likely than the other when it seems to happen all the time. Our next story of the day is from Artful Mortician. Chick tries to gatekeep my nationality? Time to ascend to a form further beyond. For context, I'm a 20-something British American male living in a very southern and undereducated part of the US. I've been here for a while now, and generally when I tell people where I am from, I get a little pushback because I don't really have as thick of an accent anymore. On to the story. I work in a small office. We have a rolling line of temps that come and go. Most of them are barely high school graduates or people with very little in the way of worldly experience. This is important for later. So one day they bring the usual parade of new hires around, and I do my introduction. Hi, I am OP. I am one of the recruiters here at Company X. I am married with 2 dogs, and I am originally from the UK. Normally, this is just a throwaway line that I use as an icebreaker, and it normally rolls right off. Until this one wonderful young woman pipes up. You don't sound British. She, of course, left out the T very purposely. I respond with, sorry love, forgot the coat and tails at home, I say as I drink my Twinnings. The group kind of laughed it off as I figured it was a pretty open and shut deal. Nope. A couple of days later, word gets around that this chick has been telling a bunch of people that I'm not British and that I'm, quote, lying for clout. She said I don't even sound British and that she is dating a British guy and, quote, knows how they act. So rather than be a mature adult, I do the very British thing of malicious compliance. I need an intern to bring me some tea. Would you mind climbing the apple and pears and pouring me a cup of Rosie Lee? I started wearing 3-piece suits, a pocket watch, and a monocle I found at a thrift shop. I basically went Super Saiyan 3 British. Obviously, about 3 hours into the first day, my boss wants to know what is up. I tell her, and she finds it so hilarious that she assigns that intern to me for the rest of the day. I kept using odd British rhyming phrases and sayings, and she would have to keep asking me to, quote, speak normal. I would reply, but I thought you know how us British people act. She quickly realized her error, and we've been cordial ever since. Nowadays, I keep my old red passport in my desk drawer just in case someone pulls that stunt again. And for the record, I'm not British, I'm English, and a Scouser at that. I think it's so funny that this intern thought that the OP was lying about being British for clout. Like, that's honestly hilarious. Let me know in the comments, do people actually do that? I've never seen it happen, but it does sound like something, you know, some quirky high school kid would do. So I'm a little curious if anyone has any experience with that. The next story comes from Just a Fiery Lizard. My fiance asks me to behave like an adult. I comply. Years ago, before we got married, my wife, 23 fiance at the time, and myself, 25, were renting together. One day, we got in some sort of argument over money or something similar. I wasn't taking it seriously enough and was being rather infantile in my comments. My wife finally has enough with me and says, for once in your life, can you just behave like an adult and not a child? I, in my infinite wisdom, think this is the perfect time for a joke. It wasn't. And reply by reaching up and grabbing her nose and saying, I got your nose. This leaves her speechless and mad. Very, very mad. She then laughs in a very defeated way and says, I'm gonna kill you. That was funny, but she grabs my shirt and yells, so not appropriate, and walks off. She didn't speak to me for a few hours. To this day, we don't remember what we were arguing about, but we both remember her being extremely angry, but having to admit it was funny, which only made her more pissed at me. We laugh about it still, but I know she still holds that one, amongst any others, against me. Before we move on, the top comment on this post is pretty hilarious too. It just said, did you ever give her her nose back? I hope he did. I also hope you enjoyed today's stories, and feel free to check them out on Reddit in the description below. Thanks for watching.